All right, greetings everyone. My name is Jim and welcome to our webinar today entitled Winning with Cybersecurity. We will continue to wait for a moment or two, allowing everyone to log in and get situated. So bear with us please, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, well, looks like we're approaching about 4 minutes after the hour, and knowing everyone's time is super valuable, we want to say again, welcome to the second webinar of a series entitled Winning with Cybersecurity, being presented by Corvid Cyber Defense. The theme today is how any size organization can achieve cybersecurity excellence and win more SBIR and government contracts as a result. So today's focus is going to be on 3 main points. Introduce those points, please. There we go. First of all, we're going to get a real-world example of the top and bottom line impacts when a DoD services provider makes cybersecurity a strategic imperative. Secondly, we're going to seek to better understand CMMC certification timelines and what needs to be done to keep and win business in 2022. And then thirdly, we're going to be looking a little bit more deeply into cybersecurity as a service as an alternative approach to achieving that cybersecurity excellence without having to dive into the traditional model of buy everything and hire lots of folks. So that's really our focus. Luckily, we have a panel that's going to help us work through this, these ideas and these topics today. We're really fortunate to have, and you can see them on your screen, hopefully. Matt Hurley is joining us. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Corvid Technologies. Corvid Technologies is an engineering, design, analysis, and testing service who provide these services to the DoD and the DoD supply chain, among others, but they're a large supplier to that audience, to that business segment. We're also luckily have Matt Webster with us. Matt's a partner at Harbor Technology Group. He's a 25-year veteran in information security. And his business, Harbor Technology, is a virtual chief information security officer services business. And then finally, John Britton, who was the leader of our first webinar, and he is the technical director of Corvid Cyber Defense. And Corvid Cyber Defense is a company that provides primarily cybersecurity as a service, and we'll be able to hear a bit more about what that really means later in the webinar. So moving along to the, let's take a review, if you don't mind, of webinar number 1. Some of you were able to attend that are joining us today, and some of you are maybe joining for the first time and missed out on webinar number 1. So what we really talked about in webinar number 1 was what goes into a cybersecurity system that, from a technology point of view, what goes into a cybersecurity system that will protect and differentiate your business, ultimately with the goal of growing revenue and by winning more contracts. That's what we talked about. John Britton led us through a really solid explanation of the technology, the people, and the processes that were necessary to achieve that type of a system. If you'd like to watch that webinar, you can get a link by just simply raising your hand or using the messaging tool inside Zoom, or you can send an email to us. And not sure what the email address ought to be. Maybe, John, sorry to bother you, John, but can you what would be a good email if somebody wanted to get a link to the?
Yeah, absolutely. Cyber@covidtech.com would be fine.
Okay.
Cyber with a C.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And so then from webinar number 1, John covered a couple key points, and I'll just hit them real quick. First of all, the security that's necessary in order to achieve this excellent level of cybersecurity. There's the technology, and then there's the training of the people in the organization. So the primary concern is getting all the right technologies that you need, and at the same time getting them integrated in a layered way, sometimes referred to as defense in depth, but multiple technologies being woven together in multiple layers, providing that safety net, that security system that's needed to achieve proper and adequate cybersecurity. And then with that also is the training of the staff that you have to make sure that they are exercising good hygiene habits and that they're aware of the kind of malware and phishing activities that are coming at them occasionally through email that they need to deal with. And then secondly, in addition to all that technology and all that training, there's the security organization itself, which is typically 4 teams of people, all security professionals, one focusing on investigation and forensics, the second on threat intelligence, the third on detection engineering, and then the fourth on security automation and countermeasures. So this is a big piece of the puzzle as well. There's the technology, there's the training of the folks in the organization, and then ultimately there's the constructing or establishing a true cyber security professional organization that's active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This isn't something that gets done 9 to 5. This is something that has to be ongoing with 3 shifts of players addressing all 4 of these key areas. And so we kind of, with webinar number 1, what we ended up with was 2 big questions we needed to answer. The first big question for business leaders, can your organization achieve a market leading, not marketing, but achieve a market leading cybersecurity posture using in-house resources exclusively, or should you align possibly with a strategic partner? And then the second was simply, can your organization afford it? Can they afford the CapEx of all the technologies and then the payroll to build out those teams that are required to buy, install, upgrade, utilize, monitor the necessary technology? So those are the 2 big questions. And so that really leads us into where we are today. And luckily we have, again, some outstanding panelists that can help us address these issues. And so we're going to, at this point, turn to Matt Hurley, the Chief Operating Officer for Corvid Technologies. Corvid does a lot of really cool things. And Matt, maybe you could just even tell us just briefly, what is Corvid Technologies core businesses? What are you guys into?
So Corvid's core businesses is about 99% of our work is Department of Defense related. So we're doing a ton of work with the Missile Defense Agency. We're building, launching missiles, doing underbody blasts. We're doing all sorts of computational physics to make sure we are keeping our soldiers safe out there in the battlefields, and also doing everything we can to just help the DoD overall and frankly the country overall. Right.
And so, well, before I get into asking too many questions, I think maybe a quick congratulations is in order. A few months ago, I know Corvid Technologies received the James S. Cogswell Outstanding Industrial Security Achievement Award, which when the award was made, I did a little more reading about it and saw that fewer than 1% of about 13,000 clear DoD contractors have ever received this award. So it's a pretty big deal. It's presented by the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Certainly appreciate that. We are certainly very proud of that. And obviously a huge thank you to our security team here at Corvid Technologies, which is led by Julie Markham. She's done an incredible job, and we are quite proud of that award.
Yeah, absolutely. That's obviously was a big team effort. But as we've been learning, as we've been having these conversations in the first webinar and now this one, so much of this has to do with leadership and vision in order to achieve these types of things. Well, let's talk a little bit about Corvid Technologies' cybersecurity journey. So when you guys started the business and you started ramping up your growth and winning some contracts, at that point, I'm going to guess you weren't really in the ballpark of being the James S. Cogswell Outstanding Industrial Security winner. you had to grow in. Yeah, you had to grow into that. So what was the original approach to cybersecurity at your company? And then, when did you decide that wasn't going to cut it? And what about it did you decide this wasn't good enough?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of small, medium-sized businesses, at the time, well, early on, obviously, we were, a 5 to 10 person shop, 15 years ago or so. But as the company started to grow and really exponentially grow, especially over the last 5 or so years, just like any other small business, we had, a couple quote unquote IT people, and they were very good. They did the best they could, but as the NIST requirements came into play, like 2016, 2017. Of course, we're doing almost entirely DoD work, so we had to make sure we're NIST compliant. That is a massive, massive lift for just 1 or 2 people. So as our company grew, it was one of those things for us anyway, where it was we came in, we hired a couple really good quote unquote IT people, and again, IT and cybersecurity are kind of 2 different things, but hired 2 or 3 really good people, and this happened 3 consecutive years as we continued to really grow. We'd hire one, they'd start to get us in a really good, security posture, and then a year later they would leave for 3 consecutive years. There was 1 left for Apple, 1 left for Amazon, and then 1 left for Google. Yeah, so right. Not only is that a headache from a recruiting perspective, but for us it was just frustrating because we want to focus on our core business. Our core business at the time was not cybersecurity. It was, again, back to missile defense and doing all the DoD prime work that we want to do. So that's kind of when we took a different approach and said, you know what, like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. There are certainly opportunities out there to potentially outsource this and do it in a way more efficient way. Again, specifically for small businesses who don't have an unlimited budget for cybersecurity. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can only imagine. And so, yeah, losing employees like that, especially when you're losing it to companies that have the visibility and the payroll capacity of the likes of Apple and Google. I mean, that's tough to compete. Absolutely. Yeah. So, well, also as you guys were going through this process, then CMMC where was CMMC on your radar at that time? I don't know, how long ago was this? 2 years ago, 3 years ago? When did you kind of turn this corner and make some of these? Yeah, so CMMC is just kind of the next evolution of NIST compliance, right? So it kind of started with NIST, and I think it was by the end of December 31st, 2017, DoD companies kind of basically had to self-assess and self-attest to being NIST compliant. And now the NIST again is kind of transferring over to CMMC, where it's a more mature model. There's several more requirements that need to be met. And that process, which both John and Matt Webster will discuss further, that the CMMC overall process has actually been a little bit delayed. It's supposed to be in the third quarter of this year. It looks like it's delaying now to first quarter of next year. But regardless, it's if you're needing to be NIST compliant, then it's just going to be a further evolution of that. So certainly
Right.
the time to start is now. If you have not already started, I'll say that.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Corvid, we started that process about 4 years ago. So
Okay, about 4
we're
years.
in pretty good shape. But for a lot of
Yeah.
other small businesses out there, I know it's going to be a big lift, because I'm very familiar with what we had to go through personally.
Yeah. So that lift, if you will, even once you changed horses, if you will, or change your approach to how you're going to achieve that level of or satisfy that criteria. What would you guess, time-wise, was it maybe a 12-month process, or to kind of turn that corner, to where you felt like, okay, we're on the right track, and we're going to start hitting all the milestones we know we're going to want to hit?
So for Corvid, it was, I guess, probably a little bit different, because as we were going through the process, we also acquired and began Corvid Cyber Defense as a company.
Yeah.
So we did it over, I would say, 3 years, and a lot of that was to make sure that we had all the policies, procedures, and everything really nailed down, so that we could help other small businesses go through the process in a much more efficient manner. So I'll say for us, it may have taken a bit longer, but again, that was with more of a global approach. So
Right.
with I guess the average small business, we'll call it, I think it's something that can be done in probably several months. If you have, certified professionals out there that will certainly speed up that process for you.
Gotcha. Yeah, so Corvid Technologies, obviously, they ended up looking at what I guess now would be referred to or thought of as largely cybersecurity as a service. And you guys apparently, once you dug into it and found a company that could provide you with that scope of that kind of holistic cybersecurity as a service, you liked it so much you actually bought the company that was providing the service, which is now Corvid Cyber Defense. But as a COO of a company that serves the defense industry, can you share the rationale you think for cybersecurity as a service for companies like yours, those that are pursuing SBIR and DoD related contracts? Why is that potentially a better approach than buying all the technologies on your own, bringing them in-house, hiring people to install, to engineer them together, to integrate, et cetera, and then obviously to oversee and manage and utilize the technology to create that threat defense? What would,
Right.
as a COO, what would you say is the rationale for taking the approach that you guys have taken?
So certainly a great question. I would say, frankly, the rationale was we wanted to get back to our core business. We're spending an incredible amount of time, again, trying to recruit the right people and make sure we're in compliance with all these rules and regulations. And that was taking so much time away from our core business that we quickly began to realize we weren't being nearly as efficient or as productive from a profitability perspective and also from a production standpoint. So when we saw the opportunity at hand, it was actually somewhat comical, but we had Rogus Networks at the time, was the name of the company that we purchased, but they came in to try and do the typical sales pitch to Corvid for cybersecurity. And within 5 minutes, our CEO actually just kind of stopped the presentation and said, "Hey, look, I'm not really interested in your product, but can I just buy your company?" And our CEO is a really brilliant guy, also doesn't like to waste time. So he clearly saw the value in it, not just for Corvid, but for the other 300,000 DoD contractors out there that have to reach all these same compliance measures. So that was kind of the long and short of it. And over the last 3 years of actually owning the company, it's been a fun ride, and frankly, it's been great for us to be able to sleep better at night, for the company overall and also for the other companies that we're protecting.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a key point about being able to focus on your core business. And I'm sure a lot of the folks attending this webinar right now are probably feeling that push-pull relationship between wanting to do what's necessary on the cybersecurity side, one, to be compliant and to be certified to the level they need with the DoD, but also obviously just to protect themselves and to protect their people and protect their data, their network. So to be excellent at that takes a massive commitment, and when you start putting that commitment on that, you run the risk of not having the resources you need to actually focus on the core part of your business, is the part that actually makes money. So let's talk a little bit about that then. The impact of cybersecurity, your cybersecurity approach on your business. So the way you guys have implemented cybersecurity, and obviously it's working in that it's given you, you received this acknowledgement from the industry that you guys are in the top 1% of DoD suppliers. How has that impacted new business acquisition for you? And has it allowed you to grow faster?
Yeah, I mean, we've been growing at a 80% clip year over year, which is pretty insane.
Yeah.
When it comes down to really any business. But having the cybersecurity lockdown and in place is what allowed us to do that, right? Like, it freed us up to be able to do that. To focus on our core mission. On top of that, though, a lot of the DoD, most of the DoD work you can't even do unless you are for sure reaching the compliance measures that are in place. And fortunately, we are at that level, and that allows us to go out and bid any contract out there. It allows us to work as either a prime or a sub on any contract out there. So it kind of just gets you through it gets you over all those hurdles from day one, as opposed to trying to fight those hurdles with every single contract that comes through. So overall, it makes the entire bid process incredibly more efficient. It makes any subs that you're working with feel a lot better about it. It makes any primes you're working with feel much better about it as well. Just knowing that the people working with them in conjunction are protected.
Yeah. From I'm sorry, someone have something to add? Okay. So from a profitability point of view, so that's kind of the top line. So the implementation and this approach has allowed you guys to grow at a really spectacular clip on the top line, right? Revenues are getting larger and larger. You guys are hiring more and more people, all those good things. But sometimes that can be done at the price of profitability. But from your point of view, with cybersecurity as a service and just kind of having this holistic provider that your organization is aligned and integrated with, does that improve do you think was that a good decision from a profitability point of view? Is that a more sustainable, more manageable cost center when done that way versus hiring and buying the technologies and hiring the people?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you go out and hire your own cybersecurity team, or even just a few people, and then you're paying them well over $100,000 a piece before benefits. On top of that, you have to stay on top of all the capital expenditures for equipment, for firewalls, for all the licenses to make sure you're fully protected. You're talking about easy, even for a small business, you're talking about pretty easily well into the $500,000 to $1 million a year range. And Corvid, again, we did it ourselves. We outsourced it effectively, and now we're spending probably around $25,000 or $30,000 a year to make sure we're protected. The other nice thing is you're not worried about overall CapEx going forward, because, and as John will probably discuss later, there are certain things that technology today is not going to be good 2 or 3 years from now, and those expenses are really, really steep when you have to replace them. With this model, we don't have to worry about that at all. We have it as a fixed budget line year over year. We know what it is. It's not going to increase. And whenever the technology expires, Corvid Cyber Defense actually constantly has all the new technology in place, and it's all part of your typical monthly bill. You're not going to be surprised by anything, 2 years or 3 years down the road. So from a budgeting perspective, it actually helps.
Right.
A great deal.
So yeah, it's kind of like with even, obviously it's slightly different, but when you sign up with AT&T or Verizon Wireless or something, if the more towers are needed, they just happen,
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely comforting to know that one, we're fully protected, and two, we're protected from a cyber perspective, but we're also protected from a budgetary perspective where we know where we can allocate our dollars, and we know that that's not going to be a surprise at any point down the road.
You lose Jim. We did.
All right, so I think everybody's probably pretty tired of seeing my face and hearing me talk at this point, but we can actually go ahead and transition over to the other Matt with a great first name, I will say. So Matt Webster is actually going to join us now and kind of give us an update on where not we, but the entire industry currently stands with CMMC.
Sure.
And kind of all the finer details behind that. So I'll pass this over to Matt. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. And you're right, great first name. Although, as you and I have laughed about in the past, my mom calls me Matthew when she's mad at me. So shorten my name for
Never more in trouble, I know.
for fun things,
Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
Well, that was fun.
Hey, Jim, we were just Matt was handing it over to me.
Yeah, I somehow was abruptly kicked out of the meeting.
That's the world we live in now.
Yeah. Apologize. So Matt Hurley, I was just asking you one final question, and I was gonna to move to Mr. Webster there, but I wanted to find out about CMMC status for Corvid Tech currently. As I understand it, your the actual certification process isn't really happening for organizations yet, although presumably it's going to begin happening soon. There could probably be a backlog in the certification process, but let's just theoretically say tomorrow we found out companies could now go through the certification process. How big of a thing would that be for you guys? How are your ducks completely in a row and you're just ready to go do it, or are there still things that need to be done? And what level of certification would you be able to go pursue?
Yeah, so fortunately, Corvid's actually in a great spot. We again, we've been going over this for the last 2 to 3 years, making sure we were ready. And we actually have John Britton, who's a certified professional through the CMMC accreditation body, and Corvid Cyber Defense is actually a registered provider organization, also accredited by the CMMC accreditation body. So if everything clicked on tomorrow for all the assessors to come out and be ready, we are CMMC level 3 ready at this point, which is kind of our sweet spot. We handle a lot of CUI, and that's where we know we're going to need to be for sure. And we are more than ready for it. So when the CMMC is ready for us, we will be ready for that. Okay,
cool. So that really transitions to Matt Webster and everyone, for those who are joining the webinar. If you have questions you want to ask about how cybersecurity has been implemented at Corvid Technologies, something specific to Matt Hurley, feel free to post that question or to message that question, and we'll try to get to that at the end. But Matt Webster, can you give us a status report on CMMC certification process? What do you know about it? Where do we stand, and what should people on the call be expecting?
Well, it is a bit of a slippery slope on what you say with CMMC and where it stands. It seems to be a moving target in a sense. It's been a little bit of a rocky road. And I think to be fair to all those parties involved with CMMC on the implementation side, they've COVID and all of that has had some role in the delays that we're seeing. But the reality is there has been some progress this summer. A number of organizations have been certified as C3PAOs. So the auditing companies are now starting to show up in the marketplace, let's say. So they are certified to perform the CMMC audits. Again, the timelines are a little bit of a moving target. There are about 1,500 companies that will need to be CMMC certified in fall of 2021. If you are one of those companies, you already know it. Let's put it that way. Everyone, as of now, everyone will have to, that wants to do, everybody in the defense industrial base that needs to, that wants to do business with the DoD will have to be at least CMMC level 1 by January 1st, 2026. Now, from today, August, whatever it is, 19th, 2021 to the January 1st, 2026, I think we're going to see kind of an accordion of how certification is required. The reality is this: if you want to continue doing business with the DoD, you should start taking action now, regardless of the timeframes. Strategizing, as Matt Hurley has said, working towards CMMC certification is a process. It's not a flip the switch and you're good to go. As is probably evident with the amount of time it's taken to get the auditing companies certified, the DoD is taking a very serious approach to CMMC. So there won't be any type of wiggle room in the certification process. That's a long way of saying, start looking at it and considering it today, which anyone attending this webinar is probably starting to think about it. If not, I've already started the process.
Right.
That's kind of where we stand, Jim.
Yeah.
I think John and Matt probably have heard various rumors. I know John and I both sit on regular calls and updates from the controlling bodies. And it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. Let's just call it that.
Yeah. So 2022, there'll be some organizations will need to be able to prove they're compliant,
right?
If not officially certified. And I think some of the larger DoD suppliers are beginning to kind of implement that type of approach, even though the formal certification process may not be fully baked. Some of the major suppliers are beginning to just kind of take it in their own hands and make sure the companies they're working with are in line. Does that seem about right?
Well, so there's a couple of things at play there, right? There's DFARS in November of last year. Everyone that wanted to continue to do business in the defense industrial base should have submitted through the SPRS system their current scoring for NIST 800-171. So that's kind of in play, and the primes are supposed to be looking at that as it relates to as they hand awards out to their subs. That being said, the primes are really risk adverse, right? They're and I think Matt Hurley would agree to this. They don't want anything that jeopardizes their contracts, both from a winning an award standpoint as well as delivering on it. The less concern they have, or less worry they have about where a company stands from a CMMC perspective, the better. So we advise at Harbor Technology Group our clients a lot, the DIB clients that we have, to just consider 2022 as the moving year. Like, whether, as you've pointed out, Jim, whether you have to actually be compliant or not, or certified or not, is irrelevant to the end goal, which is you will eventually have to get there. So there's a number of things you should be doing now as preparation to be ready, like Corporate Tech is, for certification when that switch is finally flipped. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Now,
Jim, if I might add a couple of other things, please give you a little bit of idea. So we're advising our clients to, first of all, evaluate the data that you have. This is kind of on the technical side a little bit, but just at a three-step high-level control process. Evaluate the data you have, understand the CUI that you currently have, or you may have in the future, thinking forward on contracts you may bid for. So understand where that data is. It's important to note, and as John probably pointed out in the first webinar, this is really about data. It's not about, the various tools that are out there, or the firewalls, or the MFA, or blah, 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 whatever the technical tools that you want to list here are. It's about protecting data and protecting that controlled, unclassified data. The second thing, I would self-assess against 800-171, which you're required to do from the DFARS perspective, but it should be done as part of just the exercise of moving towards CMMC certification, and complete some type of readiness assessment in relation to CMMC and a gap analysis. Of course, you can start developing a POAM or a methodology for closing those gaps as part of that process. And then finally, one of the things that we're hearing a lot of, and I'm sure Corvid Tech has thought about this as well, or had this as part of their process, is consider the subcontractors that you might use. It's important, not only in the defense industrial base or in the DoD related businesses, but commercial businesses as a whole. That subcontractor, our partners, our suppliers, that third-party risk management is a huge aspect of cybersecurity in general and CMMC specifically. So prepare your subcontractors as part of your effort of 2022.
Got it.
Yeah,
So,
to add on that real quick, Corvid Technologies has already started that process for all of our subs and vendors, because we do not want to be behind the ball here. So we are requiring our subs and vendors to ensure that they are currently at least at the NIST compliance, but we're also getting them all ready to be CMMC at minimum level 1, if not
Right.
2 or 3, depending on
And when
what
you're
they're
saying
performing for us.
NIST, you mean 800-171, right?
Correct, right.
Cool.
yeah. So do you guys believe, Matthew Webster or Matt Webster, let me ask this about, as a virtual information security officer, and you counseling a lot of other organizations on cybersecurity and the extended area there. What are you finding? What's organizationally at the top levels now? I mean, I read a lot about cybersecurity still kind of being largely viewed at the executive level as a cost center, something that is to be reduced to the smallest number, as opposed to some sort of a strategic opportunity to grow and expand and win business. I was just curious. So when I hear compliance, or when I hear someone say, "Hey, you got to get compliant about something," that tends to go into my mental folder of where I put, like, I have to do my taxes and I have to, mow the grass, right?
Right.
It never feels good to be told you need to go through compliance on anything. And so your first thought is, I'll either put that to the end, and when I do it, I'm going to do it the quickest, fastest, cheapest way I can. Is that mentality prevalent nowadays, or have most organizations gotten past that to see it as an opportunity to do something to grow business?
So, and it's such a good question, and we'll take the compliance aspect out just for a brief moment. I mean, we say it all the time, and I know John Britton has heard me say this, and I'm sure Matt has. Cybersecurity is no longer an IT problem. Matt alluded to this, when he was speaking earlier. It is an organizational problem that can impact both top line and bottom line. We are not very far away from not just the DoD, but all organizations requiring some level of cybersecurity to win business or do business with company X or Y or Z. So it has no bearing on the DoD or not. If you're a subcontractor to the DoD and you also have a commercial business, you need to be thinking about this on both sides of your ledger. The winning proposition for companies is to talk about at an executive level, not pushing it down to the IT guys or the security guys that you may have on staff or outsource, but at the executive level, talking about security, talking about how you're meeting compliance, and talking about how you can actually use the investments you've made to leverage them to win business. It's fair to say that when the clients we work with, when they talk to their potential vendors, vendor A versus vendor B, there's certain questions that we've coached them on asking to understand where a company sits from a cyber perspective. The ones that answer that question more wholly or completely always win the business, period.
Yeah.
So cybersecurity is such a prevalent problem for organizations, defense sector or not. If you're not playing nicely inside of cybersecurity, there's parts of your business you're not running well.
And so I would think there's an opportunity there too when we talk about training. So for those organizations that are taking kind of a strategic view of cybersecurity and making the positive necessary changes, it's also important to train your sales and new business development people, right? To make sure that they're able to go out and quickly explain proactively the role of cybersecurity in the organization.
Without question. So, and that's a two-sided coin. You need to train them on what to say, as probably Corbin Tech has done, and you also have to tell them what they shouldn't be saying.
Right.
So somebody shouldn't make a claim that we're CMMC certified when you're not.
Right.
You know, you can say we've adopted a NIST 800-171 and we're working towards certification. Like there's words to use, but absolutely the power of being certified or being compliant or just adopting good security practices, that shouldn't be undersold by any stretch when your sales team or your account executives are out trying to win business.
Right.
But they also shouldn't do what some sales dudes do, which is, you know, stretch the truth. So you got to be careful there too. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I want to ask you one more thing. I read an article just a few days ago. Headline was this: Cybersecurity Job Crisis. It says in the most recent global survey published by the International Systems Security Association, which I'm sure you're probably a part of, 75% of the organizations responding say it's extremely difficult to recruit and hire security professionals. Plus, 75% of the security professionals interviewed said that they are approached by recruiters literally every month. Do these stats match up with what you're seeing?
Without question. I mean, for 10 years, we've been talking about a negative unemployment rate in cybersecurity. At first, that was a little bit like, you know, I don't know what the right word is, but maybe dream thinking, but it's clearly an issue now. And you have more, you know, because the industry is expanding so rapidly, you have all these great technology companies popping up that are, you know, trying to solve problem A or problem B. They are drawing great security staff into their organizations, and they're no longer available for you know, end users, let's say, to hire security staff. So it's become even more of a problem for, you know, companies that want to build a security team to staff, because not only is there already a shortage of people, but there's folks that are being drawn into call it the selling side or the vendor side of the equation. That being said, it's one of the reasons why managed services is, it's going to sound like a total shill for Corbin. But in all honesty, this is why MSSPs are so successful these days, because of two reasons. A, they have the staff, and B, you don't get locked in with any type of investment in technology, because these MSSPs are always rolling over to the latest and greatest technology, and allow you to benefit that without the huge capital expenditure. Right.
Well, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's what it strikes me. So as or company leaders, whether they be IT leaders or business leaders, if they're a supplier somewhere in the DoD cycle, they have to begin really thinking about how realistic is it to acquire the talent and keep the talent to satisfy the cybersecurity needs of the organization and to satisfy the CMMC milestones that are going to be implemented over time. And obviously, you know, based on the data right now, it's going to be very difficult. You might be able to buy the technology, but you're going to have a hard time finding all the people you need to make use, to make use of the technology. And so I guess go ahead.
I was going to add one bit of advice. If what we've done here at Harbor, when we want to hire people, and we always do, we're always looking, is we actually intern folks and then just somehow wine them and dine them enough that they want to stay on after they've graduated college. And, you know, we have locked in staff that way. So if you're really looking if you're an organization that wants to build your own security team, look at very junior staff to start and just be willing to grow with them. Right.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Matt. So I want to turn our attention to John Britton, and we'll try to get to a couple questions at the end of this as well. But John, as a technology director at Corvid Cyber Defense, you obviously interact with a lot of companies, a lot of organizations of all different sizes, shapes, and sizes. And also, as a veteran of cybersecurity, you've seen and been part of many organizations with a lot of different strategies. So I'd like you maybe talk about your take. Obviously, you're as a member of a team that's delivering cybersecurity as a service, but also knowing the roles that you've played with other organizations like Wells Fargo. What's the difference? What makes cybersecurity as a service potentially a better option for a DoD supplier?
Yeah, so great question. And I think it's been resonated throughout a lot of the answers that both the Matts have provided today. You hear a lot of buzzwords in the industry, SOC as a service, SIM as a service, manage, detect, and respond. And a lot of organizations that do provide similar aspects to cybersecurity as a service will only provide a single entity of that, or they'll only provide a element of, a slightly immature partial part of that. As a SIM as a service is the fact that they're giving you a technology that will give you better visibility, but they're not going to give you the resources to manage it, the expertise, the understanding, or the analysis on the fact that the technology you're currently using today is broken. So to be quite to the point, with cybersecurity as a service, the whole goal is to bring a fast forward button to organizations to be able to review and put technology into their environment that currently works today, and have the engineering support on the back end, as well as the security mindset on the front end, to be able to continuously evaluate and analyze that organization and the security posture, to defend against today, and be able to very quickly adapt to whether it be, as Matt was saying, the technology doesn't work. So we as a security vendor have to make sure that we are utilizing the best in brand technologies to use against the adversary of today, or the technology or the threat of today, or from Matt Webster's point of view, and then, we're adapting to the CMMC framework to meet with it, which is not a small playbook. And, to go on some of the other questions, as we are adapting and growing and maintaining our security technology and people, we're not adverse to the shell shock of a wage that a student out of college would get. To kind of give you an understanding, I covered it in the last webinar, we have students coming to us saying that Wells Fargo have offered them $80,000, $90,000 a year, and they've got a theoretical understanding but no practical capabilities. So for $80,000, $90,000, I'm not hiring people who've done 3 years, that understanding of IT. So, cybersecurity as a service is the function of being able to actually have the full package, the technology, the processes, and the people, versus a add-on function to what your framework may be, and hope that it works.
We lose Jim again.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I guess,
So John, this is Ryan Stam with Corvid Cyber Defense. I'll just step in quick.
Hello,
Can
Ryan.
you elaborate a little bit on cyber defense as a service for CMMC and what the implications are to achieving CMMC with the service?
Yeah, absolutely. So CMMC has evolved from NIST 800-171. Some organizations might be exposed to Echo's AlphaStar, who kind of alluded and built up on the NIST 800-171 framework. 800-171 framework was a very IT orientated process where technology being in place and partial management of it was sufficient. With the evolution into CMMC, there's a whole family that basically screams out that you need to have a centralized security incident and event management technology that is monitored, managed, and maintained 24/7, 365 days a year. And obviously everybody has to be US based. So the cybersecurity, especially for how we've built it, obviously accommodates all them needs. The US based practice and the fact that that's obviously extremely more expensive to those SIM and SOC as a service that use offshore. The collaboration of the fact that, yes, there is a big technology focus in the CMMC framework, which probably makes up like 45-50% of it from a security perspective. But obviously, if you don't have the right technology, in place and or have it configured correctly, you're just going to fall flat on your face versus obviously that NIST 800-171, the only time you fell flat on your face is actually when the hackers were able to get into your environment. So with the CMMC and this being a very heavily audited process, you're going to have the auditors come in and they're not going to just say, okay, cool, you've got a firewall. They're going to be like, okay, show me the configurations and show me the traffic to show that it has been anomalized. And I don't want to see it from this month. I don't want to see it from last month. I want to see it from 90 days ago, just to prove that it's been in place, because there's a whole maturity piece of this, which, is the grand scheme of obviously how cybersecurity is now such a hard aspect within CMMC, but it can be made so much easier when you adapt a framework that is actually already established, which is obviously, as previously stated, a technology, process, and people mechanism. But that's only complemented by the fact that there's IT functions in there, and then obviously the understanding of the business, that the management are taking responsibility and ownership and dedicating associated funding for each domain to make sure that each domain is maintained, and the maturity doesn't, on day one isn't at 100% maturity, then every day after that is slowly slipping. This is a maturity framework that has to maintain and stay, which means the security as a service piece, if said technology and endpoint antivirus wasn't sufficient enough to meet the requirements, you as an individual company, if you went out and bought that contract, you're likely going to lock yourself into a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contract just to save the cost. With the as a service process, at least how we've established it, we've got a 30 days, notice to give to our vendor who we get the technology off, for us then to be able to pivot. And yes, that does open up like some workflow that we have to go from A to B, but it will always maintain that 100% compliance. But more importantly, that 150% security controlled environment.
Well, that's fantastic. I hope you don't mind me jumping in. I think Jim's having some trouble. I'm not sure if he's still here.
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you, Brian.
I
did. Yeah, I did have one other question. And maybe John, I'd like to ask this of you, but if anyone else on the panel would like to jump in too, I'd love to hear it. I know. So a lot of organizations, I would imagine every organization that's on this webinar is already making investments into cybersecurity one way or another. They're making investments. Typically, most of them are probably in-house, meaning they're buying endpoints and they're buying email protection and firewalls, and they probably have hire some specialized IT individuals or maybe even cybersecurity professionals to come in and start kind of putting this whole thing together. But maybe also they're beginning to realize that this in-house approach is going to be too expensive, and it may be unsustainable because of the shortage of professionals, the talent shortage that there is. And so maybe they're beginning to think maybe they should move off of that track and into something like cybersecurity as a service. But with that comes this really difficult decision about what do we do about what we invested, and how do we get from where we are to where we want to be. And I was just curious if you had any thoughts on how you've seen companies handle that successfully, and if you had any advice for the folks in the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of sides to this. The first one, we meet clients that already have technology in place, and it's technology that has been advised by, and I'm not trying to shit on anybody. I'll just get to the point. MSPs may be providing the IT, and they just want to plug some additional technology onto the environment to upcharge them around security. But the problem is they've gone and bought commercial grade, and they're selling a very cheap $1 kind of product that is antivirus, so therefore on paper theoretically would make the compliance standard. Now in this day and age it doesn't. So them conversations are fairly easy when we can say, a signature based AV is not sufficient enough against ransomware. So from a security perspective, ours is better. Now in other terms, or other organizations that have actually been influenced quite well, that then falls down to the fact that if they do have a comparative tool to one of the verticals that we use, question is, are you able to maintain, manage it, and monitor it to the level that you need? And then, are you creating a framework of, disconnected teams that are all working independently, or are you able to bring them all together and centralize them to make a quick mean time to detect and mean time to respond? So therefore, if anything does happen, it's eliminated before it even becomes an incident, and therefore, you can reduce the cost of the business. And that, in that hindsight, is extremely hard to do, because a lot of times they may have 4 or 5 different vendors working individually, then have to have dedicated people inside who don't quite understand what they're asking, meaning the time to turn around anything is extremely long. Therefore, the business cost to the organization is on man hours and the dedicated IT guy who's now basically the cyber guy, and he's just doing the same job but with 5 other vendors. So a lot of times that does resonate, where you're able to, as Matt Hurley alluded to, maintain a constant understanding of what the cost is going to be. And the fact that, your IT director now can go, I can do my job and go patch things and maintain the Active Directory and do all that instead of having to continuously guess at the cyber stuff. That typically does resonate, and each one of them, are identifying a cost savings. Even if it is a site net new, or they do have to sink some cost, it's very easily, at least from our perspective, how we approach the organizations, it's easy math to identify, whether it be return on investment for the fact that you're not going to get hit by ransomware, or return on investment for the fact that we're taking, a clunky, broken process and actually making it streamlined.
Right. Good. Matt Webster, you have anything to add on that? Clients or organizations that are already invested, in a cybersecurity approach that is now they're kind of starting to realize or see that it's not going to work. It's not going to long-term be the path they're on. It's not going to really be sustainable because of the expense of the technology, but more importantly, the scarcity of talent. How do they get from where they are to where they need to be?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about as it relates to compliance, that's kind of one thing versus just cybersecurity in general, right? So John's done a great job of outlining kind of both sides of that equation. When it comes to compliance, we are hearing from our clients a lot that have been running down the security, road. They, I'll say fat, dumb, and happy at a level. No other way to say it. They haven't had any breaches. They haven't been hit with ransomware. They've been able to self-assess to 800-171, and whammo, CMMC is now in place. And they realize that these investments that they've made in both people and technology will not suffice. And now they've put their business at risk because they need to be able to get to the CMMC level X to continue to win DoD business. So it really behooves all organizations to look at what they need to do to do a readiness assessment for CMMC. And then the reality is that the stark reality is they probably will have to go outside and get that help from a company like Corvid to be able to meet the certification levels, or to meet the levels required to be certified. Does that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, it does. And I think I asked a question that probably we could create a whole webinar around. So I appreciate both you guys trying to answer something, that's that big so quickly. But I know we're up against it on time. We're coming up the top of the hour, so everyone's probably ready to go grab some lunch or something. But I just want to say, Matt Hurley, Matt Webster, John Britton, thanks for taking the time to share what you know about these things. To those who attended today, thanks for taking the time to learn more. And obviously, everybody on the call is available to talk with you, to answer more questions. And I think there might be a survey at the end. Marnie, I don't know if you want to explain that. I think I was told that we're going to do a survey of some sort that's going to be coming by email or being done live. Is that correct?
Yes, that survey will be coming shortly, and it should just be an automated survey that each participant receives.
Okay, great. So for those of you who have joined today, if you'd be so kind as to when that survey comes through, I don't think it'll take more than a moment, but if you could just provide us with some feedback so we can do a better job in the future to provide content, some information that you would find useful and helpful to your organization. So with that, we'll close it out. Again, thanks everyone for joining in, and hope you have a great day. Goodbye.
Don't.